So there's an interesting addition made to the Nintendo website this week, which is to say that Ask the Developer, a kind of rolling series of developer interviews, has been updated to volume 18, no less. And it's about Mario Kart World on the Switch 2. And 4 parts to this interview, covers a lot of ground. And I think from my perspective, Tom, one of the most interesting things about it is how long the game's been in development and how, essentially they were originally planning for it to deploy on the original Switch, not the Switch 2, but development seems to have switched over to the new console as early as 2020, which would be like when the Switch 2 was actually in development. Curious what you think about that and what you think about the whole interview, really.
Yeah, fascinating interview. As always with the Q&As that they run, it's very, very like a lovely formal sort of layout to every one of those. And you can almost feel they laugh about it now in the interview, but their struggle to adapt this game and figure out what the next Mario Kart will be. And there's a lot of tidbits in there, but the top line really was the switch from Switch 1 to Switch 2. Prototyping apparently began in 2017, but they made the jump in 2020 to Switch 2. And the key reason, it turns out, is what we always assumed is one of the main factors was boosting the racer count from 12 to 24. And apparently they had headaches trying to figure out how they were going to possibly do it on Switch. They're quoted in several points at one point in the article saying, we tried everything from, lowering the resolution, dropping to 30 FPS on the original Switch to make it work, dropping visual settings. And in the end, we weren't happy with any of those compromises. It felt like too much of a cutback and it didn't feel right to do it that way. The other part of that, which I found very interesting, was the sense of relief that the team felt after having that jump to the next generation. And then they've got this, on the one hand, the relief of knowing that they can get this feature in and that they can do this open world design and have 24 races, which, by the way, was key to making each race feel packed and occupied because these areas are so big. But the other half of the sort of that jump is that they now had to live up to the expectation of a generational leap in other ways. But it sounds like, for all intents and purposes, the art team there were very happy with the fact that they could implement all these ideas. They could basically add more trees, from what I gathered, as one of the things. Just more trees, which is great. So yeah, very, very interesting insight, and I think quite transparent as well. Apparently they refreshed the tools as well. That's another thing. Programming system built from scratch was one of the lines in there. But yeah, really fascinating. So yeah, really fascinating.
Look good, to be fair. Oliver, what was your take from the interview? I guess, from my perspective, when we first saw Mario Kart World in that reveal, the initial reveal, it was very sort of, what can you say? They were keeping their cards close to their chest to the point where we thought it could have been a cross-gen game. But, the more we learnt about it, the more we discovered, hey, there is actually quite a lot going on here. I'm just sort of staggered that they are even sort of thinking about stuff like a full open world with weather systems, stuff like that for the Switch 1. Yeah. But it does sound as though Switch 2 was a bit of a liberating moment for them. I guess the other thing, thinking about it, is that Mario Kart, the Switch never actually received a bespoke Mario Kart game.
It didn't.
Mario Kart 8 was, of course, a Wii U title. So,
true.
In a sense, there's 2 generational leaps here. But anyway, your thoughts on the interview?
Well, I think there was actually one Mario Kart title for Switch. Home Circuit, was it? It was the mixed reality Mario Kart game.
Okay.
In 2020 with the little kart thing. Yes, sorry. That technically... I'm being pedantic, obviously. No, but I mean, this whole interview to me made a lot of sense because the game's clearly been in development for a long time, given the scope and polishment they've achieved. And so it would be pretty clear and make a lot of sense that Switch 1 was targeted from the outset, even if some kind of cross-gen integration was probably inevitable. But if you look at what they've achieved here, achieving good visuals on Switch 1 with 24 players, in open world race events at 60 FPS. Again, they kind of mentioned that they had to push on some of these elements, perhaps to even consider it on Switch 1. Push on resolution, push on frame rate maybe. These were the kinds of compromises that were suggested or implied to be suggested as things they would have to pursue. And I think basically what you see is on Switch 2, they're making none of those compromises. So like, could a version of this game have existed on Switch 1? That's what they were planning to do. I presume it could have existed on Switch 1, but it wouldn't have existed in a format that would have been like a clean upgrade over Mario Kart 8, I feel. And I think you see a lot of benefits in the rendering side even as a result of that change. Like you get excellent water rendering with good looking reflections, geometric waves, better materials, more complex shaders, long draw distances, quite dense open world environments, greater use of real-time shadowing, and of course twice the racers on track, which is quite an accomplishment. On the surface, like you said from that initial showing, it doesn't seem that ambitious, but I think if you do some side-by-sides here like I did in my preview about a month ago, you can see that it's clearly a step beyond Mario Kart 8, and it's a visual experience that the Switch 1 probably could never deliver at an acceptable performance level or image quality level for players who do enjoy the Mario Kart titles and are coming from Mario Kart 8 in particular. So I don't think it would have been very successful technically on the Switch 1 if it were to ship on the Switch 1. And in general, I would kind of zoom out here and say, I think you can probably expect quite a lot of games like Mario Kart World on the Switch 2, where maybe these are games that you could have considered possibly running on the Switch 1 at low frame rates, at low resolutions, these kinds of compromises. But maybe on Switch 2, you're getting them delivered at 60 FPS, at higher resolutions, at 1440p, at 1080p output, these kinds of things. And I think that's a very sensible approach to development on the console, and if Nintendo was to go down that route for a lot of their first-party titles, I certainly would not object to that approach, because I think it probably helps a lot with development, and you probably end up with a lot of titles that look very, very good, run very, very well, play very well, and are satisfying experiences for players, instead of like a lot of titles that are kind of in that 30 FPS muck, but with more expansive rendering features that perhaps players are not always looking for in these Nintendo titles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just think the concept that maybe when they started development on Switch 1, it just opened up so many new horizons when they had so much extra performance when they moved to Switch 2. So, if they were desperately trying to optimize for Switch 1, all of those optimizations and thought processes would automatically go on to the new game on Switch 2. And, there's been many sort of scenarios in the past where, if you target a specific hardware level, a modest hardware level, but then you have access to more resources, then you can actually benefit quite tremendously. The classic example I think we always use is Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Layer, which was designed to run at 60 FPS on a Switch 1, which resulted in tremendous scaling on much more capable hardware. But obviously the concept that they moved across to Switch 2 so early, like 2020, I think that's a bit of a revelation as well, especially when we've got some insight now that we know that the final chip was like taped out in 2021. So I'm really excited by this because we've actually got a game coming where it's been in development for this specific level of hardware for many, many years at this point, basically 5 years. I think that's really exciting in terms of a developer that's obviously super talented to begin with, but has had access to that particular level of performance, to those features for so long. I think, Oliver, you were looking to take point on the Mario Kart World review, right?
That's correct, yeah. If scheduling pans out, of course. We're very busy.
Yeah, well, yeah, especially in June. But yeah, obviously we're going to be doing a big showcase review on that. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. And do check out that interview on the Nintendo website. It's really, really cool.